here, and I think it'll make it a little easier for the people who are listening. The ice houses were as wide as this building and doubled the depth, and 3 stories high with no support on the inside. Like an empty shoebox. It was then filled with ice. And so when they did burn or collapse, there wasn't anything to support them. And the reason I know that is my brother and I used to play in an ice house in July and August when we would go to northern Maine. And it would be up as far as the ceiling, filled with piles of ice and covered with sawdust. And we'd play tag inside that ice house because it was the most comfortable place to be. But I mean, it was just a rectangle with no inside supports, which, you know, and they're huge.
That's why they have the braces on the side. So they have a strong wind when you go over.
Right now you'd see salt sheds that are similar to ice houses because they
Yes,
have,
the salt
they have
sheds, yeah.
buttresses on the
Yeah,
outside.
now they made the steel though. Steel
When I was at DPW, I used to design the salt sheds, and it's the same basis as the building.
Was there so much natural water to
Speak up,
replace all
lads.
that ice every year?
What's the question?
The ponds produce that much water that will come back and
Yeah, the streams would feed into it, and the snow would melt.
And also the underground wells.
Are you saying when the ice wasn't thick enough?
So when the water comes up, let's say remove the ice.
That would be-
Well,
As far as thickness is concerned, just to throw in something, Barbara Drozic told us this last year. May I repeat your story, Barbara? When you would skate down at the Pillars Pond Ice House was on the cove on this end. In fact, I think at some Croak's house, there's still part of the foundation there, I'm not sure. But apparently, according to Barbara, they would cut that ice and just in the cove, if it wasn't thick enough, it would then re-sunk. Until it became thick, it was sunk and then refrozen. Am I right? And that's the way they brought theirs up to standard. But I think it was all locally sold ice.
That ice scraper I showed you, they did scrape maybe 3, 4, 5 times a season. Every time it snowed, they had to remove the snow. So it wasn't done just once.
John?
Just a quick question. I noticed the horses on the ice and all. Did they have special shoes to keep the traction?
I can only assume so.
Yeah, maybe.
Like an ice skater.
Right.
One thing that the ladies would relate to, I don't think there's anyone old enough here that can remember. One of the chores, you got the ice box, usually the ice box was very close to the back door. And the problem was that the ice melted, and it collected in a tray underneath. And if you didn't remember to empty the tray, you'd have water spilled all over the place. My father made an invention, it was copied by all the relatives. He rigged a funnel underneath, put a hose on it, drilled a hose through the side of the house, and had it drip out and out. That was the greatest invention for the house.
Gravity, yeah.
Is that a patent, Frank?
Second floor.
There's horses that drown. It did happen, but a lot of horses would drown.
Question was about whether horses drowned, fell in and drowned. Yes, right. There was an ice house on Suntalk, and you look at the old maps, I can't remember it, you know I'm very ancient and so on. But it was down about and back of where the tennis court is now. And this is from the map, and there was a spur railroad from the ice house up to 128, because 128 was a railroad bed, with a railroad too. And I guess I took it off a map, it was 1897 or something, 1887. It's in that Lynnfield book, which I forgot to bring to you. There was the ice house there. I don't know whether any other ice houses, I don't think so. It was all privately owned around Suntalk itself. But as you said, Wenham, the ice from Wenham, the people brag about it up there. And with that, the Queen Victoria wanted that ice and so on.
Well, there's a big ice house in Unquarter Power, John.
Yes, that one. Did you burn, who burned that one down? The Quanah Power one went down, back where the church is now,
And it
right?
was still around in 1950.
What, did you take ice off, the Round family take ice off? I don't think you can name a place where there wasn't ice, because it
May
was,
I ask how you can keep ice from not sticking when you say it's anything in between? No sawdust between the big blocks of ice?
No.
Well, why wouldn't you put two pieces of ice together and they'll adhere, wouldn't you think?
Again, one cube of ice would keep the next cube cold, therefore it wouldn't melt at the lower levels.
Oh, so it wouldn't melt to make that layer
The
sticking
whole
like
place was cold, and it wouldn't melt. The edges would melt, not the middle part. Usually the sawdust on
On top,
top.
One thing, they shipped ice from here, they started like kind of in Arlington and so forth, was where most of it came from. They started shipping it by sailing ship down to the Caribbean, which is only 6 or 7 days by schooner. They packed it with sawdust, and the same thing, you fill the hole with ice, now you got hundreds of tons of ice, you pack sawdust around the outside, they lost about 5% maybe. Then they started shipping it further out, they wound up sending it to India, which is like 230 days in a sailing ship, and they'd get there and they'd not lose more than 5 or 10%. But the thing about the Wenham Lake ice, because Wenham Lake ice was now recognized in England and India and South Africa and every place as being the best ice, all the ice that went over there was Wenham Lake ice. Even though Wenham Lake produced, say, 50,000 tons of ice, they shipped 2 million tons.
That's merchandise.
It's
Like Kobe beef.
You have an ice box and a hunk of ice in the ice box that's keeping your milk and fruit cold. So you have a hunk of ice that's keeping the other ice cold. And just compounds like that. One hunk of ice keeps the other hunk cold.
an illustration of how slow it is to melt. I had the two stories in my youth. I taught school in South Paris, Maine. Boy, was I green. But next to us in Norway were the companies that made dowels out of birch. We made dowels and lollipop sticks and for thread and so on and so forth. They made out of birch. In the wintertime, the locals would go out and cut the birch, white birch. They cut this length, and then they'd go stack them in the yard, and they would cover them with snow. They'd keep piling snow on them so that they wouldn't leach for as much as anything, or stain. And I was up there in August, and they were still pulling logs out of the snow. And so slow it would be. And also while I was there, they were cutting out of Norway Lake, a big ice house, and there was a regular production of cutting ice there. They were out with jeeps and saws and everything like that. But it was a huge production. But you mentioned that book. On the postcard we sent out to 2 books of good reading. And they're both very, very good books. I have one of them. The one about Tudor shows how this Yankee really cornered the business. And the ice, New England ice went all around the world. And of course, it's the most green production you can have. Why don't we do it today? But my chips are, but there must be much more than we know. Doc, you're still on the floor.
It was one of the safest trips you could take on a sailing vessel full of ice because it just couldn't sink.
Yes, sir. I would mention though, this picture.
Is that why? Because ice floats, right?
Yeah, it would fill up the hole with water, but the ice would float to keep the whole boat afloat.
No? Good. What was the
Mr. Conway, can I ask you a question? I was working on the cleanup of Lyngate Motors on Boston Street. And we were doing an excavation, and unfortunately, Lyngate had a release, they had an MDC trap, but the pipe broke, so all the oil that they used to use to service the vehicles and everything ended up in the ground, and we had this huge excavation. And we had called dig safe, we had made sure we didn't hit any water lines, gas lines, anything like
There's a
that.
stream right behind you, right? Strawberry
Well, the
Brook.
stream, what's the name of the stream?
Strawberry Brook.
Okay, Strawberry Brook was somehow diverted into this big pipe. And the pipe was like a pressure pipe. And the excavator hit the pressure pipe, and it filled up the whole area with water. And to this day, I don't understand how that would have happened, but Strawberry Brook goes from Flax Pond to someplace else.
Down west of the beach, it's like a
It was like amazing. It was like hitting a pressure main. And it was the brook, the whole brook was squeezed into this 8-inch pipe.
Maybe gravity or something.
Yeah,
Create the
and
pressure.
the excavator operator knew enough to go to Waterworks in Malden and get one of these clamps that you just fold over and then you clamp it up and you clamp it. But I could never figure out how that happens.